Welcome into the Husker247 podcast. I'm Mike Schaefer, joined by Michael Bruntz, making his first podcast appearance since I don't know, mid-June, late June, sometime in June. Did you appear on a podcast in June?
I think the last time I was on a podcast was shortly after Jamal Turner caught that pass against Michigan
Okay.
State in East Lansing. That was the last pod I
When
discussed.
I had a chance to go viral by just allowing myself to be run over by Jamal Turner.
Or running over him. You could have gotten him, I think.
I don't think so. I think the pads and the momentum, I think I'd have gotten truck stick there. Just would have ended up in the first row of the seats at the Woodhouse.
Yeah, Woodshed.
So. Woodshed. Yeah, Woodhouse is that's
where they got to pay for that kind of sponsorship.
Yeah. If they're interested, though, we can put them in touch with someone. I'm sure.
Find us.
All right.
So Michael, that was the last podcast I was on. So I look forward to learning about the next 8 or 9 years of Nebraska.
Did you know there was a coaching change? Like 3 of them since then.
Which one?
Yeah.
Which one?
Well, the first guy didn't work out, so they went and got a second guy, and he also didn't work out. So now they're on the third guy.
Okay.
There's some excitement for the third guy.
I'm all caught up. The third guy is going to be making an opening statement soon.
He will. Do you think he's going to say anything, or do you think he's going to review the tape from last year and just determine that's the route to go?
It's interesting scheduling by the Big Ten folks. PJ Fleck, followed by Ryan Walters of Purdue, then Matt Rhule, Nebraska. I think they did that with Walters. It's kind of like that song in the set list where you got to go to the bathroom and everybody heads for it.
That's kind of rude. Ryan Walters is presiding over former Big Ten West champion Purdue in his first season here as Boilermaker.
I'm not talking about everybody else. I'm just talking about the court reporter that has to be the stenographer, because I think PJ Fleck and I think Matt Rhule are going to be battling for who has the longest opening statement.
Do you think that if Rhule were to nip PJ Fleck with a longer opening statement, he'd be like, and that's the first win we're going to get over Minnesota?
Well, it depends if he's about sloganeering or not.
I think Matt Rhule likes him some slogans.
He does. I don't know. I don't think that he'll do that. Although I'm sure there'll be media that will read it as such, given all his swipes that he apparently did or did not take at Deion Sanders. So there's never a shortage of those things. But yeah, Matt Rhule headed to Indy.
Matt Rhule going to Indy. So I've had this question asked of me now multiple times, sometimes on radio programs, sometimes from just people who I'm talking to, and they want to know what I think is going to be said in Indy. Do you anticipate that Matt Rhule will give you any information that you didn't already have prior to going into media days? Like, I don't think we're going to get some like real nuts and bolts type stuff. I think we're going to get a lot of platitudes and some colorful cheerleading about how the summer went and how well everybody worked out, and their 10% thing. I think we're going to get some talk about that, but I don't think you're going to get some like nuts and bolts type stuff.
It's going to be big picture. Yeah. It's going to be a lot of culture talk. It's going to be, well, here's the thing. So because he was in the NFL and he's not like Bob Stitt level media darling, but Matt Rhule is popular with national college football media. I think that's not a stretch. And I think you're going to get a lot more national attention on Nebraska than what you have had. Not a lot more, but
on more. Nebraska or on Rhule?
Both.
Do you see it being like Rhule's going to have to give opinions on all the topics du jour?
No, I just think you're going to get the guys that have kind of ignored Nebraska for the last 3 or 4 years. Like Matt Rhule is going to be kind of the cheese for the national media member trap. And so it's going to be a little bit, you're going to get a lot of big picture stuff. Here's what I'm interested in. I'm curious.
What kind of cheese?
Well,
if Matt Rhule was a cheese, what flavor of cheese he would be?
Cheddar. I'm eager to be around Jeff Sims a little bit.
Okay.
Because we don't really know Jeff Sims, do we? I don't feel like we do.
I don't know Jeff Sims at all.
And somebody asked me today, like, oh, what are you hoping to learn at Big Ten Media Days? And I mean, we've heard from Jeff Sims a total of like 7 minutes since he's been at Nebraska, um, in a big media setting. So I'm curious to know Jeff Sims a little bit more and see how forthcoming he's going to be about things. I mean, there's kind of a lot of storylines around him, right? I mean, you have this coaching staff that Marcus Satterfield last night had to basically stop himself from praising the Sims too much. I think there's a lot of confidence in the walls over there that he's going to be an elite quarterback, and we don't know. I'm eager to hear about the leadership piece of things. I'm eager to hear about how he's meshing with everybody, what this offense is going to look like. I mean, a lot of what the conversation was before was about him handling the cold weather, which I think he's got handled, but there's a lot of other things we probably need to talk about too, over the course of 30 or 45 minutes that he's mandated to be at a table and answering questions.
Yeah, it is. He's probably the most interesting of your three players. I am with all the apologies to Luke Reimer here. I'm probably most interested in hearing where Ethan Piper comes down on things after this full spring. I mean, he had one of the more notable interviews, I thought, during the spring period that had him maybe the first day, maybe it's the second day.
Mm-hmm.
And really, I mean, what he spoke to was kind of the big culture change that took place in that place when Matt Rhule came in, and kind of the fresh air that he felt as someone. And I think this is why it's important when Ethan Piper says it versus a media member. This is a guy that grew up dreaming about playing for Nebraska. And then he's talking about how miserable everything was when he's living out his dream. And obviously he's not starting, but he's talking about how miserable of an experience it was in, November of 21, and going through even fall camp last year, and just kind of like how tight everything felt and how it just wasn't enjoyable. And obviously it's just the off season, so it's supposed to feel a little bit lighter, but you can certainly got the sense from an Ethan Piper in that interview that he felt like a different player, and he feels like the team is full of guys that are in a similar situation. Now that he's had Matt Rhule for, an additional 4 months beyond that interview, kind of where are things at? And then certainly he's someone that, kind of as Cody Green was the guy who would talk about 2010 quarterback play. I could envision a world where Ethan Piper is our go-to source, if it's not Nori Newelli, for what's happening along that offensive line, because everybody else, while certainly fine at talking to the media, is a little less colorful, or maybe a little bit more choosy in their words. And Ethan Piper is a little more willing to just kind of lay it right out there. So I think we'll learn a little more about the offensive line through him as well.
Do you read anything into the fact that he's there? Like,
I think it means he's one of their six guys.
As it stands right now, would you have him as a starter against Minnesota?
I think he's probably your right guard. And then what that does for me, it leads me to two questions. One was implanted into my brain by someone who occasionally knows some things. And then the other is just, thinking out loud. And really what it does is what happens to Turner Corcoran. And so that's your first question on it. But when I said this to the person who implanted something in my brain, they're also like, shouldn't you really be asking what it means for Teddy Prohaska, because he's a guy that's played the least, and you still have a giant question mark as to where he's actually at physically and mentally. Yeah. And so I think we've written Prohaska and Sharpie at left tackle, and that's still who I would have to guess is going to start against Minnesota. But I think there's at least a chance that you could have both Turner Corcoran and Ethan Piper in a starting lineup, and no Teddy Prohaska too. So I don't think it's set up front, but I think Ethan Piper at the very least has forced his way into a rotation.
Yeah.
I think they like him a lot. And it might be way more than just a rotation, but that's just kind of, some half-ass guessing here on July 25th.
Well, it raises the question about it seems like every time there's an offensive scheme change or a new offensive line coach, it's where's the rotations? Why aren't you rotating? You should be rotating more. We used to rotate, and this group at least feels like one that they have the personnel to rotate. It's like if they want to. at spots that
They have 7 linemen that I think they feel okay about.
yes. Yeah.
The problem is they only have 1 tackle that they feel okay about.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's well, and that's the rub. I mean,
Yeah.
and that's been the issue for a number of years. But I mean, I think that would be if you wanted to get a little loosey goosey with the rotations, you could do so at guard this year, just because of who they have. And I think you could probably even put Henry Lutovsky in that group as well a little bit too. I wouldn't put him at the front of the pack, but I think he's in that conversation.
That's kind of the 7th name for me.
Yeah.
Would be Lutovsky there, and then Piper, New Ellie, Corcoran, Ben Hart, Ben Scott. I think that's your 7, or Prohaska. Those are this kind of the 7 names at this point. I don't have a lot of thoughts on Luke Reimer kind of being your guy there. I want to ask you this though, Bruntz. If you were simulating this season in your brain and Nebraska's 3-3-5 defense is playing really well, is there any way that this happens without Luke Reimer? It feels like he kind of can be a little bit of the straw stirring the drink out of that 3-3-5 if it's as disruptive as we think it could be for as athletic as he is. We might see some more tackles for a loss and blitzing out of a guy that really doesn't have a lot of that. I mean, he piles up a bunch of tackles, but we don't see a lot of TFLs.
No, I think this type of a defense is tailor made for the way he plays. And I think as you get into it and kind of look at, where guys land, because we still don't know, who, what the who the 3 are going to be. I mean, it could be Reimer, MJ Sherman, Nick Henrich. It could be,
Blaze Gunnarsson, Jamari Butler, and John Boyd.
Yeah,
John Bullock. I don't know who John Boyd is.
John Boyd? Is Tony Fields part of that conversation?
No. I said John Boyd. I'm going to look up a John Boyd and see if I can tell you who that is.
I think you said John Voight, and I was like,
nope,
okay,
not talking about
interesting. I don't remember him in the portal. Without knowing kind of how that's going to fall, I think it's hard to know. But I think there's a couple people that like my brain keeps going to in this defense that like have to play well in order for it to function. Reimer's one, Ty Robinson's another. You got to figure out somebody that can do something for you at safety with any kind of consistency. But yeah, I mean, I think just to my idiot brain, I think it makes a lot of sense that Luke Reimer should be able to excel in a defense like this. And if they can keep him clean, up front, I think he has a chance to do that. He also seems to me to be a guy that like at the end of every season, it just looks like he's gone through the ringer, like has just been beat up, really kind of tested physically. So eager to hear maybe where his health is at, because I don't think he did a ton in the spring in terms of just, good on good type stuff because they were trying to save him a little bit.
He was pretty sidelined in the spring. Yeah. Real quickly, John Boyd, football player. There's a John Boyd actor. But there was a John Boyd that went to Clemson that then transferred to Delta Valley State and was in this most recent NFL. Yeah.
Delta Valley State, John Boyd, of course.
Yes. He was in the NFL draft and no one took him. So I think he's still floating around out there. But he is not on Nebraska's roster. That was just, another patented Mike Schaefer misspeaking there. All right. Any last thoughts here on Indy? Anything that you're particular? How I've not done an Indy media days. Do you want it to go back to Chicago, or are you happy with it being at Lucas Oil?
I would prefer Chicago personally.
Like shorter drive.
Indy's just kind of a weird place to get to from Nebraska.
Yeah, it is.
Like you're probably you can drive it, but it's kind of a long drive. You can fly there, but you're connecting anyways, so it's fine. I kind of question the value of media days as the more time passes.
Welcome to the team.
I know.
I've been here for a while, just running it down every opportunity I get.
I know. And plus, I mean, let's be honest, it's always a better event when it's at the Chicago Hilton, if we're being honest. So
just so you can make fugitive references for 3 straight days. No, It's always a better event when it's in Chicago because I can force you to drink Old Style and chase it with a
Malort.
With a Malort after. And then about 3 of those in, you and BC start to glaze over a little bit. And
that's true.
Pretty good.
A little glazy. You're not going, you drew the long
Thanks for
straw
that, by the
or
way.
the short straw, depending on how you view media days. What do you want to hear from this? Like, what do you mean? Like, I need to know this from. Is there anything you need to know? Like, why are we doing this?
No, there's really nothing I need to know, and
Okay.
I don't. I mean, there's lots of stuff I want to know, but I'm not anticipating it. You get that? Like,
Yeah, no, I get it.
there's just a difference there for me. I don't anticipate we're gonna get any of that sort of nuts and bolts. I mean, I would love to get a better sense of what kind of the rotation maybe looks like at running back, like how they want to utilize it. A lot of it, Bruntz,
Do you think
and
they
I think
know?
well, that's just it. I think the fans feel kind of similar to this. Like, we're going to have a month lead up writing about this team. And quite frankly, whatever we write carries a marginal amount of value because no one has a real clear picture of what that's going to look like against Minnesota in that opening game. I mean, we can talk about what the offense might look like, and they're going to have an idea as to what they want to run and what they want to call. But if they show up and they want to run the ball and they're not opening up holes, then you're quickly going to have to pivot to passing oriented game plan. Or, if you get there and your defense just isn't able to slow down Minnesota's rushing attack, like then the 3-3-5 suddenly is going to get changed right off the bat. Like there's so much that we think we might understand or know already, but it's all subject to change based on what actually happens in that first game. I mean, I think there's so many different ways this thing can go. And the thing that I least expect is a really well-oiled machine when they take the field against Minnesota.
Yeah. No, I think a lot of it right now is taking what limited information you have and filling in blanks. And yeah, it'll be interesting. I when you talk about the running back thing and to say do they know? I think there's spots where they don't have a clear picture of like, okay, if you had to play a game on July 31st when they start camp, who would be out there for you? Wide receiver, I don't know that they know that beyond maybe the top 3 guys.
Temp, Washington, blank. I think it's 2. Yeah. I mean, I don't know who the third is. Maybe it's Betts. Maybe it's Isaiah Garcia Castaneda. Maybe it's Malachi Coleman. Maybe it's Josh Fleeks. Maybe it's split out Thomas Fidone. Uh,
Yeah.
Maybe it's Jaden Doss. Maybe Ramir Johnson is going to play this Brian Westbrook role that Mark Whipple talked about, but never actually happened.
He's playing Brian Westbrook for the third coaching staff, and
for those not watching on YouTube, the head shake from Bruntz there when that got mentioned was pretty good. Pretty good.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's one spot. I think running back and how that shakes out, I think that's more situational than it is, written in Sharpie. So I think a lot of the questions that people are going to have at the start of fall camp, I don't know that the coaching staff necessarily has answers to right now. I think they have hunches, but I think that's as far as it goes.
Yeah. Well, we have hunches on who's going to be at Nebraska for a barbecue this weekend as the Huskers are having a recruiting event. We will talk with Michael Bruntz about some recruiting. He can give his thoughts on Preston Taumua and Ja'Cory Barney, and we'll talk a little about what Nebraska's got going on in recruiting for 2024 and 2025 when we return here on the Husker247 podcast. All right, Bruntz. So you kind of missed both commitments in the month of July. When did you first learn that Preston Taumua became a member of Nebraska's 2024 recruiting class? Was it that Saturday night? Did you stay up?
It was
you were out on the West
time.
Coast.
I was on the West Coast. It wasn't that late for me.
Wow.
So, yeah. That was a big win.
It was a big recruiting win.
That was a big win for Nebraska. I don't know that if you lined up the scenarios and teams that were in the running for him, that I would have put Nebraska anywhere near the front of that pack when he started making visits. So
the funny thing about it was the differing information that you would sort of hear, like,
yeah,
it's Nebraska and this team. No, it's actually Nebraska and that team. No, it's actually Nebraska and this team. And then it turns out it was Nebraska, and then everyone else just kind of followed in some order.
Yeah.
But that was certainly interesting. And I'll let you touch on it here, but a big recruiting win for Donovan Raiola, who, I think kind of needed it too.
Yeah, he did. I think perception-wise, he needed. I mean, they've added offensive line talent, but a lot of it's been regional, and this was an elbows out recruiting win for him and for the staff. And kind of getting into, they were always there, I think, in the picture for him, but a kid that probably projects to more of an interior player, but you watch his highlights and you're like, okay, he moves pretty well. Like, you could see maybe a tackle if things actually had to go that way. But I think when we talk about the way that Nebraska's offensive line is currently, you've got a lot of veteran guys that have played a lot of snaps, and at some point that's going to be handed off to somebody else, and it's going to happen pretty quickly. And getting that kind of a talent into your room, I mean, that was a big win. And now, you're turning your attention to, a Grant Bricks who's still out there. It is kind of, maybe that last big piece for this offensive line class, which you can get into him a little bit, but I think they've done a really nice job of, getting into more of these, not necessarily all summer. We heard about, okay, you get a guy to camp, you beat like 2 FCS schools for him for commitment. I mean, this was a big time win for the staff that I think kind of pushes back against that narrative of, they're just kind of taking guys that don't really have many offers.
Yeah, it's pretty wild because they had that stretch of commitments where it's like, but yeah, where was that guy really going to go?
Right.
And then now they're currently on a stretch of commitments that includes Carter Nelson, Ja'Cory Barney, and Preston Taumua. And it's like, oh, these dudes had options. All right.
Yeah.
So it's not all just, grabbing the easiest, commitments that you can. They went out and they worked for several of these. You mentioned Grant Bricks. He is expected to be at Nebraska's barbecue event that they're having here. I believe they're calling it the Cookout or whatever, on July 30th. They're going to have a lot of people at this thing. Some perspectives like Grant Bricks and Caleb Benning, but a whole bunch of commitments. Pretty much heard from all of Nebraska's in-state guys, at least the Metro ones. They're all planning on being there. They've got their 2025s and Tyson Terry and Caden Vermoss will be up there for that as well. Chase Lofton coming into town, another 2025. So a nice event for them to have, a good way to kind of kick off the start of fall camp, and also, really kind of make these guys feel like they're part of the program already. I think that's a big, Daniel Kalen was kind of saying he gets the sense like this is a way for them to be able to interact with the players and everything and just kind of own it. Like, this is your program. You may not be here yet, but you're a part of this. We want you here because we're about to embark, the start of our season. And so I think that's kind of a nifty narrative way to kind of provide ownership for commits that while they're not on the team yet, you get to know these guys, you get to feel like you're part of it. And then for the guys that aren't committed yet, you start to show like, this is what the atmosphere that we're trying to build. This is what we want you to join. So all in all, it could be a pretty valuable weekend for Nebraska with the recruits that they have on campus. And it's already been a great summer. I've made this multiple times, Bruntz, but do you remember the first recruiting class that you and I ever covered? You started a little earlier than I did in April of 2011, and then I hopped in October of 2011. Nebraska, I think, signed 12 or 13 total players in that class. They have 24 committed right now.
That was the Greg McMullen Westerkamp.
The class was loaded. You go through it, and so you have Greg McMullen, you have Westerkamp, you have Tommy Armstrong, you have
Afalava. Was he part of that
class? Afalava, Vincent Valentine. You have Avery Moss, if people remember him before he
Aaron Curry
his way off campus. Aaron Curry, I think, was part of that class. Amani Cross was part of that class. They had a wide receiver. Besides Westerkamp, that was also a part of that group as well. It was an interesting class. They got a little bit out of it.
Paul Thurston, that class.
Paul Thurston was on that. Yeah, I think he, and then I want to say there's an Oregon offensive lineman named Corey Whitaker. That
California.
was kid. It was Nebraska and Oregon. Was maybe he chose Nebraska over Oregon at the time. That was the first class. Thomas Brown. You remember the day Thomas Brown committed, and you and I tried 700 people to confirm that thing, And then we got like a sheepish "I committed" text at like 8:30 at night, like 7 hours after the commitment. This was back before Twitter just knew everything right away.
I would like to forget that day if all possible.
Well, David Santos would like to forget the day that, Thomas Brown got himself kicked off the team, but here we
Yeah,
are.
yeah, probably, yeah. I'll leave that one alone. You've been a proponent of the cookout idea for a while,
Yeah, I'm big
correct?
on the barbecue. I like the barbecue. I'm
Why
a
is
I'm a
it?
fat man that likes smoked meats. Blame me.
But if you look around the country this weekend, there is no shortage of like big cat weekends, elite 5-star get together, like big dudes hangout, like that kind of stuff. Like
Uh,
every every it seems like every program in America has some kind of event this weekend, and I was always surprised that Nebraska just never did it. Like you have that weekend, you can't host officials, like just have people hang out. Like it doesn't seem, I don't know. It doesn't it shouldn't seem novel, but it does.
Now, I will say this in defense of Nebraska, they played week 0 the last couple of years, so they've already sort of
Yeah.
been in it, by the time this week has rolled around. But yeah, I mean, previously Scott Frost could have taken advantage of this more, especially, once you were able to start having recruits on campus specifically this week. I'm trying to think if there's anybody notable. They've had junior college guys come out for this before, but this is the first time that they've had like a July sort of event. It makes as I said, it makes all the sense in the world. It's kind of like a kickoff. You get the guys around, you smoke some meat. They're going to have, I'm sure, all sorts of like yard games and probably a home run derby and some kind of putting contest. And like, this is just kind of like what they do. And this is what, really honestly, it's what Bo Pelini used to do for Big Red Weekend. Like that's essentially what this was. Now it'll be condensed to a Saturday, and there's going to be a lot more people, I think, on campus. But I expect it to be well received, and wouldn't be at all surprised if Nebraska walks away with a commitment from this weekend. I mean, you got a guy like Christian Jones who's changed up his visit plans. I think that one's closer than I would have realized at the beginning of the summer. I don't look for Caleb Benning to make a decision before he takes some official visits in the fall. But Grant Bricks, if he said he wanted to, there's maybe one more school he wanted to visit, but he's going to go back to all of Oklahoma, Kansas State, and Nebraska. He might be ready to make a decision in early August. And just from all the sourcing I have on that, it still feels pretty good, in Nebraska's direction. Probably more Nebraska, Kansas State than Oklahoma at this point. But so there's still some heavy hitters and some potential big things left in recruiting, and they have 24 commits already. Like it's unfathomable to me that they're at this spot. We've never seen this before. We
It
haven't. Like I'm not
no,
trying to
it
like.
no, it's usually like you're adding like 13 guys in December. Like that's usually how it's typically worked.
Well,
Like
yeah, and there's like this stretch because it happened when I got married, and they took these commitments from like Ladarius Webb Jr. or whatever, and nobody even knows if these defensive backs that Travis Fisher is offering, nobody even knows who they are or if they're any good, and they're nominally part of the class, but like those were the sort of July commitments Nebraska had been getting previously. So it's just a different feeling right now, all the way around. Anything
yeah.
else you want to get into recruiting wise?
No, I don't think so. Um, yeah, it'll be interesting. I think it's a good thing they're doing this weekend, and I think it helps when you have so many in-state kids committed that you're able to get them to campus easily and hang out.
Yep.
But yeah, I think yeah, it's good to happen. And then what, July on Monday, you're starting with your first practice. So and then only a month away till Minnesota.
So I'm guessing you didn't listen to the overtime podcast, but I
I
would. Oh, sorry.
I started it and then my phone died. So
You started it and you're like, I don't want to listen to these guys.
no, it was a fun little topic, put it that way. It's a
Uh,
topic I
well,
enjoy.
I want to give you 20 seconds here. Do you have a favorite overtime memory?
No, it's hard because so many of them recently have just been such duds. Like
Yeah.
not even like threatening to score. I don't have one. I really
Wow.
don't. When was the last time they scored a point in overtime? It was at Iowa.
It's the Iowa one. And what I said on your phone died well before this, but I referenced you because you would always remark, even in the moment, but then certainly after, whenever recalling the game, the stupidity of punting to DeMornay Pearson-L in the
He
fourth
kept
quarter.
kicking. Why did they keep kicking to him? You gave that man a lifetime contract, and he kept kicking to him.
Oh man, one of the greatest rivalries in the Big Ten is you versus Kirk Ferentz's contract, and really Kirk Ferentz's production, and
Yeah.
that's certainly one of the sticking points for you is that he punted to DeMornay Pearson-L multiple times in 2014.
Just keep putting your hand on the stove. Maybe it won't be hot. But guess what? It was always scalding because he was running it back.
Well, we are going to put our hand on the stove, and as we wonder whether Nebraska football will have a season worth discussing for once coming up in 2023. But Big Ten Media Days are next, so I'm sure Bruntz and BC will break that down for you. We'll have plenty of coverage from Indy on that, and of course, the visit weekend this weekend as well. We'll have all the follow-up for that as well, so be sure to check out Husker247.com. I'm Mike Schaefer for Michael Bruntz. We're Husker247. We'll catch you next time with another Husker247 podcast.